Christmas Eve, 1834. Snow had been falling on the Ashbourne road since noon, and by twilight it had swallowed the milestones so completely that the driver could no longer swear he was in Derbyshire at all. He stopped the coach anyway. He stopped because the horses had begun to tremble in the traces, and because the young woman inside had asked him 3 times how much further. "Gates," he said, jerking his chin at the darkness ahead. "That's as far as I take you." Anastasia gathered her carpet bag and stepped down into snow that came past her ankles at once. Her boots had been mended twice by her own hand, and the second mending had already begun to fail. The cold found her through the seams of her grey coat, the way water finds a crack in a wall. "There's a lodge," she said. "There must be a lodge." "There's a lodge." The driver did not look at her. He had been kind for 40 miles, and he was ashamed to stop being kind now, so he chose not to see her. "Pull the bell chain. Someone'll come." "And if no one comes?" "Then you'd best pull it twice, miss." The coach turned in the road, the wheels shrieking against packed ice, and it was gone before she had counted 20. Then there was only the wind and the black iron of the gates, and beyond them a drive lined with lime trees that stood like a congregation waiting for a sermon. Anastasia set down her bag and looked up. The gates were magnificent. That was the cruelty of them. Iron scrollwork rose 15 feet into the falling snow and met in a crest at the center. A stag, crowned, standing over a broken sword. Every curl of that metal had cost more than her father's last honest year. She had spent 4 days on public coaches, eating bread she had wrapped in a handkerchief on Sunday, and she had arrived at last to find that even the gate was better dressed than she was. She laughed. It was small, and it came out white in the air, and it steadied her. Then she pulled the bell chain. Nothing answered but the snow. She pulled it again. A dog barked somewhere far off inside the grounds and thought better of it. The lodge window held a light, and the light did not move. Anastasia drew her letter from her breast pocket, where she had kept it for 11 days, and read it once more, though she had known it by heart since Lincolnshire. "You will present yourself at Ashbourne on Christmas Eve. The arrangement is understood on both sides. You will be met." She had not been met. She folded the letter along its worn creases, put it away, and did the only thing she had left to do. She stood straight, put her hands together in front of her, and waited at the gates of a house that had sent for her and forgotten her. She would not shout. She had decided that somewhere near Nottingham, in a coach that smelled of wet wool and turnips, watching her breath fog the window, her mother had gone to her grave without once raising her voice to accredit her. Anastasia had inherited 2 things, a bracelet she could not sell, and the certainty that a person who begs at a gate will be kept at gates forever. So she waited. The snow settled on her shoulders and made her a statue of herself. She had been waiting perhaps a quarter of an hour when she heard the horses. They came from the road behind her, not the drive. 3 riders moving at the careful pace of men who had been out too long in weather that had turned against them. The first was a big man on a grey. He wore a black riding coat, gone silver across the shoulders with snow, and his hat had been jammed down so hard that his face showed only from the mouth to the brow. He reined in 6 feet from her and stopped. For a moment, nobody spoke. The horse blew steam. Anastasia looked back at him and did not move. "Madam," the man said. His voice was low and quiet and used to being obeyed. "You are standing in the snow." "I am aware of it, sir." "Are you lost?" "No." "Are you begging?" The wind pulled at her coat. "No," she said. "I am expected." Something changed in the set of his mouth. He swung down from the grey in one motion, boots striking the road, and now she could see his face properly. A hard, tired face, perhaps 33, with grey eyes that had gone entirely still while they looked at her. "By whom?" he said. "That is my business, sir, not yours." Behind him, one of the other riders made a sound like a man swallowing a cough. The big man did not turn his head. "Everything within a mile of that gate is my business," he said, "including the road you are standing on. Who sent for you?" Anastasia hesitated. Then she took out the letter, because she was too cold to invent anything better, and held it out to him. He took it with his glove still on. He had to turn it toward the lodge light to read it. She watched his eyes move down the page, and she watched the exact moment they stopped. He read it again, slowly. "Who gave you this?" he said. "A gentleman in London. He acted for the family. It was all arranged through a house in Cheapside. The terms, the coach fare, the bond." She lifted her chin. "The contract is lawful. I have read every line of it. I am not a fool, sir, whatever I look like." "No," he said, still staring at the paper. "You are not." "Then perhaps you will be good enough to have the gate opened and tell whoever keeps it that I've come, as I said I would come, and that I am not going to freeze out here to spare them the trouble of walking 60 yards. The man lowered the letter. "Madam," he said, "do you know the name of the man you have come here to marry?" "Of course I do." She said it as steadily as she could. "It is written at the bottom of the page in his own hand." "It is written at the bottom of the page," he agreed, "in someone's hand." And then he did something she had not expected at all. He unfastened his riding coat, heavy and warm and smelling of horse and wood smoke, and put it around her shoulders before she could refuse it, and said to the man behind him, without ever taking his eyes from her face, "Open the gates, take her to the manor, not the steward's cottage, the manor, and light a fire in the library before she gets there." "My lord!" "Now!" Anastasia stood very still under a coat that weighed more than everything she owned. "My lord," she repeated. "Nicholas," he said, "Duke of Ashbourne." He held up the letter between two fingers, and the snow fell through the light between them. "And this is my name at the bottom of your contract. I have never seen this page before in my life." Christmas Eve, night. The library at Ashbourne was longer than the street Anastasia had lived on for the last 2 years. She stood just inside the door with her carpet bag still in her hand, because putting it down felt like a claim she had not earned. Books climbed the walls to a gallery, and above the gallery to a ceiling painted with a sky that was doing better weather than the one outside. A fire had been built up so recently that the footman's boot marks were still wet on the hearthstone. "Sit," the Duke said. "I am wet through, my lord. I shall spoil the chair." "Then I shall have a wet chair." He gestured at the fire. "Sit down, miss." She had almost forgotten to answer to it. "Anastasia." "Anastasia," he repeated, and let the silence stand where a surname should have gone. He did not press it. That was the first thing about him that frightened her. She sat. The heat went into her hands and turned at once to pain, the way it does when a body has been cold long enough to forget the difference. She kept her face still. He had gone to the sideboard, and she heard the small, ordinary sounds of a man who did not ring for a servant when he could manage a teapot himself. He came back with 2 cups. He gave her one and took the chair opposite, and only then did she realize he had not sat down until she had. "You have questions," he said. "I have one. Ask it." "If your name was written on my contract by a hand that was not yours," Anastasia said, "then who was I coming here to marry?" The Duke turned his cup a half-circle on its saucer. "My cousin Julian arranges a great deal on my behalf," he said. "Leases, purchases, correspondence I have no patience for. He signs Ashbourne on things I have never read, and until tonight I believed that was a convenience." "And the bond? The money paid to the office in Cheapside?" "Paid out of my accounts, I expect." "So I am bought," she said, "with a stranger's money, in a stranger's name, for a purpose I was not told." "You are in my library drinking my tea," he said. "That is all that has happened so far." She looked at him over the rim of the cup. He had shed the snow and the hat, and his hair was dark and disordered, and there was a shadow on his jaw that had been there since morning. He was not a handsome man in the way the word was used in the London papers. He was something harder to name. He had the face of a man who had carried something heavy for a long while and had stopped noticing the weight. "You should send me away," she said. "In this weather?" "In any weather. I am an embarrassment, my lord, a woman answering an advertisement. Whatever your cousin intended by it, the whole county will invent something worse by 12th night." "The county has been inventing things about this house since my grandfather's day," the Duke said. "It has never once asked my permission." Anastasia set down her cup. She had meant to say something proper and grateful. What came out was, "Vous vous moquez de moi." She heard it a half-second too late. The Duke did not move, but his eyes came up and settled on her, and they were not tired anymore. "Pas du tout," he said quietly. "Je vous assure." The fire cracked. Somewhere down the corridor, a clock struck the half-hour and went on with its business. "That accent," he said, "was not learned from a governess in a market town." "I read a great deal." "You read Molière?" "I have read Molière." "In French, evidently. And Racine?" She should have said no. She had 4 days of caution behind her, and she threw it into the fire like kindling, because the room was warm and she was tired, and because nobody had asked her a real question in 2 years. "Racine wrote women who are given no choices and then blamed for the choices they make," she said. "I find that difficult to forgive in a man who had all the choices in the world." The Duke of Ashbourne looked at her for a long moment. "My tutor said very nearly that," he said. "He was a fellow of Trinity. It took him 30 years and a bottle of claret to arrive at it." "Then I have saved him the claret." He laughed. It was short, and it surprised him more than it surprised her. A rusty sound, as if the mechanism had not been wound in some time. And Anastasia, who had not been laughed with since her father died, felt something in her chest give way that she badly needed to hold. She reached for her cup to cover it. That was the mistake. The sleeve of the grey coat was too big for her. It had been her mother's, taken in twice and never well. And as she stretched her arm toward the tea table, the cuff slid back from her wrist to the middle of her forearm. The firelight caught it at once. A bracelet. Silver, blackened with age in the grooves, worked into a chain of interlocking links, and set at intervals with 5 squares of jade so dark they looked green only when the flame moved. Old work. Not fashionable work. Nothing a woman in mended boots should have been wearing, and nothing she could have stolen, because a thief would have sold it in a week and eaten for a year. Anastasia pulled her sleeve down. She did it calmly. She did it a heartbeat too slowly. When she looked up, the Duke had gone entirely still. He was not looking at her face. He was looking at her wrist, and the color had left him, and his cup had stopped halfway to the saucer and stayed there. "Where did you get that?" he said. It was not a question. "It was my mother's." "Where did your mother get it?" "My lord, Anastasia." He said her name the way a man says a word in a language he has not spoken since childhood. "There are 9 of those in England. There were 9. 5 links, 5 stones. The clasp worked as a stag's head because the jade came out of a company ship in '92, and the man who bought it had a sense of humor about his own crest." He set the cup down at last. His hand was not steady. "I have seen that bracelet before. I saw it on a woman's wrist in this house, at this hearth, at a Christmas dinner when I was 19 years old." The fire had grown very loud. "It belongs," said the Duke of Ashbourne, "to the House of Stirling, and every soul of that family vanished off the face of England 11 years ago, the week after they were accused of a crime I have never for one moment believed they committed." Anastasia sat with her ruined boots in front of a duke's fire, in a stranger's coat, and understood that the 4 days of running were over. "So," he said softly, "would you like to tell me who you are? Or shall I guess? Christmas Day. Julian arrived before the pudding. Anastasia heard him from the dining room. A voice in the entrance hall pitched to Carrie, the sort of voice that had learned early that servants move faster for volume. She had come down at 9 to find a place laid for her at a table that seated 30, a fire already burning, and a plate of eggs that she ate more of than she meant to. The door opened hard enough to strike the wall. "Nicholas." Julian came in, still wearing his greatcoat, snow melting off his boots onto a carpet older than the county. He was perhaps 28, fair where the Duke was dark, and he had the sort of good looks that go soft young. "There has been a mistake." "Good morning to you as well," the Duke said, without lowering his newspaper. "It is Christmas Day, in case the calendar in your rooms has failed. Belle tells me she slept in the blue chamber." She did. The blue chamber. There was a fire laid in it. The steward's cottage has a chimney that is not drawn since October, as you would know if you had ever gone inside it. The Duke turned a page. "Sit down, you're dripping." Julian did not sit. He looked at Anastasia, then, properly, for the first time, and she watched his eyes go over her mended sleeve, her hair pinned without a maid, her hands, and arrive at a conclusion he had reached before he entered the room. "You," he said, "you understand your position here, I take it?" "I understand it better than I did yesterday," Anastasia said. "Then you'll understand that you were engaged, under terms, with a bond paid to a house in Cheapside and a fare paid to Derbyshire." He pulled a folded paper from his coat and slapped it onto the table beside her plate. 6 days a week. You'll begin in the linen rooms, and when you have proved you can be trusted with a key, you may go up to the still room. The marriage is a formality that follows a year of good conduct. That was always the arrangement. Anastasia looked at the paper. She did not touch it. "That is not what my copy says," she said. "Your copy says whatever the office told you it said." "My copy says a great deal, Mr. Ashbourne. I read it in a coffee house on the Strand, with a clerk who was paid 6pence to read it aloud to me a second time, because I did not trust my own eyes on the 4th clause." She lifted her chin. "There is no year. There is no linen room. There is a bond, a name, and a date. You have been careless with 3 of those, and I have been careless with none." The newspaper came down. "She has you," the Duke said, "on the wording." Julian's color rose from his collar. "Nicholas, this is a domestic matter. It is a legal one, which is worse." The Duke stood. He was a head taller than his cousin, and used it without appearing to. "Until the paperwork is verified by a man I choose, in a town I choose, this woman remains a guest of this house. She sits where she likes. She goes where she likes. You will not speak to her about linen rooms, and you will not speak to her about keys, and if she asks you for anything at all, you will give it to her, and thank her for the compliment." "You cannot be serious." "You wrote my name on a contract, Julian." The Duke said it very quietly. "Let us be careful, you and I, about who is asking whom to be serious." Julian stood in the doorway with his coat dripping. He looked at Anastasia once more, a long, cold look, taking inventory. And then he went out, and the front door shut in a way that shook the glass. The Duke stayed standing. "Finish your breakfast," he said. He came for her at noon and took her through the conservatory because he said the light was better there and the glass kept the wind off, and because there was nobody in it. It was a strange, beautiful ruin of a place. Someone had loved it once. Orange trees stood in tubs along the south wall with their leaves gone leathery from neglect, and frost had drawn ferns across every pane so that walking through it was like walking inside a shell. Their footsteps rang on the tiles. "My mother built this," the Duke said. "She died in it, sat down among the lemons one afternoon in June and did not get up." He said it without any weight at all, which told Anastasia more than weeping would have. "Nobody has trimmed a thing since. I cannot bring myself to give the order." "They are not dead," Anastasia said. She reached up and turned a leaf. "They are only cold. Take the tubs 6 feet nearer the glass in March, and you will have fruit by Michaelmas." He stopped walking. "You are not going to make this easy," he said. "My lord?" "Anastasia." He turned to face her. Behind him, the frost had made the whole south wall white, and the light came through it, soft and gray. "I did not sleep. I sat up in that library until 3, and I have spent every hour since going through the same arithmetic, and it will not come out any other way. The Earl of Stirling had one daughter. She would be 24 now. She had a French mother, and a father who let her read anything in his library and boasted about it at dinner in a way that people thought vulgar. And the week the accusation was laid, every soul of that household went out of England and was never traced." She said nothing. "He was accused of moving money that was not his," the Duke went on. "The evidence was a set of ledgers nobody was permitted to examine, and a witness who could not be produced. Your father was ruined in 11 days by men who never once had to stand in a room and say a word out loud." His jaw moved. "I was 19. I wrote 3 letters. I was told to be quiet, and I was quiet. And I have thought about it every year since." Anastasia's hands were shaking. She put them behind her back. "Say it," he said gently. "Just once. To one person." And the thing she had held for 11 years, through the crossings, the cheap rooms, the false names, the 2 years of scrubbing floors in Lincolnshire under a name that was not hers, came out of her in a voice she barely recognized. "Catherine," she said. "My name is Catherine. Lady Catherine Stirling. Anastasia was my grandmother, and I have been wearing her like a coat since I was 13 years old." The Duke let out a breath. "And I did not run from the courts," she said, and now she could not stop. "The courts have forgotten us. I ran from my father's brother. He has spent 11 years hunting the last of the Stirling money, and he cannot touch a penny of it while I am free and unmarried and out of his reach. Which is why, my lord, a contract with your name on it, sending me to a house 6 days' travel from anyone I know, arrived at my door in November like a gift from God." The Duke's face changed. "Who," he said slowly, "told your uncle where to send it?" 2 days after Christmas. The Blue Chamber had been searched. Catherine knew it the moment she came up from dinner, because she had left her carpet bag with the buckle on the left, and it was now on the right, and because a person who has lived under a false name for 11 years develops habits that never quite go away. She stood in the doorway with her candle and looked at the room for a long moment before she went in. Her mother's shawl had been refolded by someone who did not know how it folded. The lining of the bag had been pulled back and pressed down again. The papers were gone. She sat on the edge of the bed and made herself breathe. There had been 3 of them, sewn flat into the lining since Rotterdam: her baptismal record, her mother's marriage lines, and the letter her father had written on the last night. The one that named his brother in his own hand, the one she had never shown a living soul because it was the only thing left in the world with his handwriting on it. Downstairs, a door opened. Julian was already in the study when she reached it, and he had made himself comfortable. He had a glass of the Duke's brandy, and he had put his boots on the fender, and the 3 papers were spread on the desk in front of him like a hand of cards. The Duke stood with his back to the fire. He had not moved when Catherine came in. He did not need to. "There she is," Julian said pleasantly. "Lady Catherine Stirling. Do come in. You'll want to hear this." "Those are mine. They were in my cousin's house, in my cousin's linen, under my cousin's roof, and I have been managing this estate's affairs since before you arrived in your interesting boots." He held up the letter, and Catherine's whole body moved toward it before she caught herself. "Ah, that one matters, does it? I thought it might." "Julian," the Duke's voice was flat, "put it down." In a moment, Julian swung his boots off the fender and sat forward. "Let us all be honest with one another, since we are being so festive. Nicholas, Do you know what you have in this room? You have a woman whose family is still, in the eyes of the law, under an unresolved accusation. 11 years unresolved, not cleared, not tried, left open like a window in a house nobody lives in. He tapped the baptismal record with one finger. And you have proof of who she is, which is worth a great deal to a gentleman in Hertfordshire who has been advertising for it, discreetly, for the better part of a decade. Catherine's mouth had gone dry. You know him? I know a great many people. It is what I am for. Julian smiled at her. Your uncle is a patient man. He does not want you harmed, if that is what you are imagining. He wants you found. Found, made a ward, made quiet, married off to a curate in a county with no roads, so that the last sterling signature that could ever be put to a document belongs to a man who does as he is told. He shrugged. It is not wickedness, my lady. It is administration. And you sent for me, she said. It was you, from the beginning. I sent for a servant. Julian took a sip of brandy. The advertisement was genuine. I wanted a woman with no family who could be put somewhere useful, and your uncle's man wanted a woman with a great deal of family who could be put somewhere quiet. And we discovered, over a very civilized dinner, that we were describing the same person. He named the price. I named my cousin, because it was Ashbourne's name that would bring you here without questions. Half on delivery. He set the glass down. You have been remarkably difficult to deliver. Get out of my house, the Duke said. Julian did not look at him. Not yet, he said. Nicholas, hear the whole of it, because I have been carrying it alone, and it is heavy. If she is written to the courts as found, and it takes one letter, to one gentleman on the Northern Circuit who owes me a kindness, then the estate that has sheltered her becomes an interested party. You have concealed a woman with an open accusation over her name. You have housed her. You have, by your own excellent instruction, treated her as a guest and not a servant, which the world will read exactly as it likes. He spread his hands. Ashbourne survives it. Ashbourne always survives. But there will be 6 years of it, and it will cost you the chancery suit over the western tenancies, and the whole county will spend those 6 years asking each other, in the kindest possible way, what she gave you for it. The silence went on too long. Catherine watched the Duke's hand close slowly on the mantel. How much? The Duke said. There, now we are cousins again. Julian's face opened with relief. 3,000 and my name on the Cheapside bond, and I will burn the letter in that fire tonight and forget her face by epiphany. 3,000. It is less than the suit. The Duke of Ashbourne crossed the room in 4 strides. He did not raise his voice, and he did not raise his hand, and Catherine understood in that moment exactly how frightening a quiet man can be. You wrote my name, he said, on a woman. Nicholas, you took my name, which my mother carried and my grandfather carried, and you sold it to a man in Hertfordshire for half on delivery, and now you stand in my study and offer to sell me back my own honor at £3,000. He reached down and took the papers off the desk, all 3 in one motion, and put them into his coat. You are done here. You are done with the leases and the correspondence and the accounts and the rooms in the East Wing and the horse. You will be off this land before the clock strikes 1, and if you are not, the men who carry you off will be men who have known you since you were a boy, and I will make certain that you see their faces while they do it. You are choosing her. Write your letter, the Duke said. Write it tonight. Post it from the crossroads. And then live for the rest of your life as the man who did it. Julian went white. He stood and picked up his gloves, and at the door he turned back with his mouth already shaping something, and found nothing there worth spending, and went out. The fire settled. He will send it, Catherine said quietly. He may. He will. He has nothing else left to sell. She was surprised at how calm her own voice was.
"My lord, I have watched a man be destroyed by a letter before. It took 11 days. My father had 400 tenants and a seat in the county and a wife who loved him, and none of it was worth 11 days.
The Duke turned. "Catherine."
"Thank you for the fire," she said, "and for the tea, and for asking me a real question."
And she went upstairs and began, very carefully, to fold her mother's shawl the way it folded. 3 days after Christmas. She left at 4 in the morning, which is the hour when even a great house forgets to watch itself. Catherine had learned how to leave. She had learned it in Rotterdam at 13, and again in a boarding house in Ostend, and again in Lincolnshire when a woman at the market had looked at her too long and said, "You've a face I've seen somewhere." You take nothing that makes a noise. You go down the back stairs on the outside edge of each tread. You leave a door unlatched behind you rather than closed, because a latch carries and a draft does not. What she had not learned was how to leave a place she wanted to stay. She stood in the library for a full minute before she went. The fire had burned down to a red seam. Her cup from Christmas Eve was still on the tea table where a maid had not yet had the heart to take it, and she looked at it, and she understood with an awful clarity that she had spent 2 years scrubbing floors and had never once been as frightened as she was now, because for 2 years there had been nothing to lose. She put the note on the table beside the cup. "My lord, you asked me a real question, and I have thought about the answer for 3 days. Here it is. A man who is ruined for a stranger is called a fool, and a man who is ruined for a woman he has known 5 days is called something worse, and you will hear both words for the rest of your life in rooms you cannot leave. I will not buy my freedom with yours. I have taken nothing from this house but the coat, and I will send it back from the coast. Trim the orange trees. They are only cold." See, then she went out through the conservatory door, into snow that had stopped falling, and left the world blue and silent, and walked the 1.5 miles to the crossroads. The supply wagon left the yard of the Fox at 5:30, carrying salt and rope and 2 crates of preserved lemons to a village on the coast called Rundle, where a boat put out twice a week for Ireland. Catherine paid 4 shillings, which was more than half of what she had, and climbed up beside a carter named Hobbs, who had a mouthful of nails and no curiosity whatsoever. "Rundle," he said. 2 days, if the pass is clear." "Is it clear?" Hobbs looked at the sky in the east, where the grey had gone a strange, dirty yellow along the bottom. "No," he said, and shook the reins. The Duke found the note at 7:30. He had come down early because he had not slept. He had spent the night at the desk with 3 papers spread in front of him, and a decision he had already made, refusing to feel like one. And he saw the cup first, and then the folded page beside it, and he knew before he opened it. He read it standing. He read it twice. Then he was in the hall, shouting for Bell, and the house came awake all at once, the way houses do.
"My lord?"
"Miss Lady Catherine, her room."
"Empty, my lord. The bed's not been slept in past 2, I'd say."
"The stables?"
"Nothing's gone. Not a horse, not a trap."
Bell was struggling into his coat as he came.
"My lord, if she went on foot in that—"
"The crossroads." The Duke was already moving. "What leaves the Fox before 6? Bell stopped dead. "Hobbs," he said. "Salt wagon. Runs the pass to Rundle." "The pass?" "My lord, the pass had 4 foot in it on Tuesday, and there's weather coming down off the moor this morning that Tompkins says he's not seen since the year of the— Saddle the grey." "My lord—" "Bell!" The Duke turned, and Bell, who had known him since he was a boy of 8 and had once carried him home from the ice with a broken wrist, stopped talking. "She thinks she is doing me a kindness. She has spent 11 years being told that the safest thing she can do is disappear, and every single time she has done it, she has been right." He pulled his gloves on. "She is going to be wrong once. I intend to be there for it." The storm caught the wagon at the top of the pass. It did not build. It arrived. A wall of grey coming across the moor at the speed of a horse at the gallop. And then there was no more, and no sky, and no road, only white, and a wind that took the words out of Hobbs's mouth before Catherine could hear them. The horses stopped. They stopped because horses are sensible. Hobbs got down and went to their heads and stayed there, because that is what a carter does. Catherine sat on the box with her mother's shawl over her head and the Duke's coat around her, and understood, with the flat calm that comes at the end of running, that she had made an arithmetic error. She had been so careful about what she was saving him from. She had not sat down once and asked what it cost to be saved by someone who had gone. An hour, perhaps more. Time stopped being a thing you could count. Then Hobbs's voice, thin and astonished. "There's a rider." Catherine lifted her head. He came out of the white at a walk, because nothing could do more than a walk, leading the grey by the bridle rather than sitting it. Snow had built on his shoulders and his hat and the horse's mane until he was less a man than a shape that had decided to keep moving. He came the last 20 yards and stopped at the wheel and looked up at her, and his face was raw with cold, and his eyes were perfectly steady. "You did not send the coat back," he said. Catherine's mouth opened. Nothing came out of it. "2 miles on," the Duke said, "there is an inn at the fork. Hobbs, take the horses down slow and keep to the left of the wall. The drop's on the right and you'll not see it." He put his hand up. "My lady, get down." "You should not have come." "That is very likely true." "You have read my note." "I have read your note," he said, "and I have thought about it the entire way up this pass, and I have an answer, and I am not going to shout it at you in a blizzard from underneath a wagon." He kept his hand up. It did not waver. "Come down, Catherine, please." And she looked at that hand, bare because he had given his gloves to the horse's bridle and going blue at the knuckles, and 11 years of careful, correct, exhausting arithmetic went out of her all at once. She took it. 4 days after Christmas. The grey mare at the fork had a low ceiling, a fire that smoked when the wind turned, and 26 people in a tap room built for 12. The storm had swept them all off the roads and dumped them there together. 2 drovers, a family of 5 going to a funeral in Kendal, a Methodist preacher, a woman with a basket of hens she would not be parted from, a fiddler, and Hobbs, who had got his horses into a byre and himself into a corner with a pot of ale and the expression of a man who intended to stay there until March. Nobody looked twice at the Duke of Ashbourne. That was the thing Catherine could not stop noticing. He came in with snow to his knees and his hat ruined, and the landlord took him for a farmer of some sort and told him to shift his own bench if he wanted one, and he shifted it. They got the last booth by the smoking end of the fire, which was why it was last. "Your hands," Catherine said. "They will come back." "Give them to me." He looked at her. Then he put both hands flat on the table, and she took them and turned them over and rubbed them between her own, and he said nothing at all for a long minute while the blood came back in and hurt him. "Where did you learn that?" he said at last. "Ostend. There was a woman in the room below ours who had been a fisherman's wife. She said the mistake everyone makes is the fire." Catherine did not look up. "She said you must be warmed by something that is already the wrong temperature and coming toward you, not by something perfect that is sitting still." "That is either very good medicine or very good philosophy." "It is both. She was a great deal cleverer than my tutors and could not write her own name." The landlord's girl brought stew and black bread and did not curtsy because she had no reason to, and went away again. They ate. Catherine had not been hungry in 4 days and discovered she was ravenous, and she ate the way she had eaten in Lincolnshire, quickly and without ceremony, and she was halfway through before she remembered to be ashamed of it. The Duke had noticed. He had also, she saw, begun eating the same way. "You needn't," she said. "I am extremely cold, and this is extremely good," he said, "and there is not a soul in this room who cares how either of us holds a spoon. Do you know how long it has been since I was in a place where nobody cared?" "Yes," Catherine said. 11 years. He stopped. "Yes," he said, "I suppose you do." The fiddler in the corner started something, badly, and the funeral family began to sing over him, and the hens objected, and the room got louder, in the good way. Under it, the two of them had a kind of privacy that no drawing-room in England could have given them. "Say your answer," Catherine said. "You said you had one." The Duke put down his spoon. "You wrote that a man who is ruined for a woman he has known 5 days is called a fool," he said. "You are right, he is. I have heard the word used about better men than me, in rooms I could not leave, exactly as you said." He turned his cup a half-circle, that same habit. "Here is what you did not put in your arithmetic. I have been called nothing at all for 11 years, not fool, not scoundrel, nothing. Do you understand what that costs? I have been correct since I was 19 years old. I wrote 3 letters about your father, and I was told to be quiet, and I was quiet, and I have been quiet ever since, and I have run this estate flawlessly, and my mother died in a glass-house full of trees I have not had the courage to prune." "That is not the same as ruin." "No," he agreed. "It is slower, and it is on purpose." Catherine's throat closed. "You are not a liability," he said. "You are the first thing in a decade that has cost me anything. I would like to know what I am worth, Catherine, and there is only one way a man ever finds that out." "And if the price is 6 years of chancery and a name in every mouth in Derbyshire?" "Then I shall know I was worth 6 years." He said it quite simply. "Julian offered to sell me my honour for £3,000. He priced it too low, and he has never once in his life understood why that insulted me." The fiddler found the tune. Somebody cheered him. "There is something else," the Duke said. He reached into his coat and put the 3 papers on the table between the bread and the candle. "I sat up with these all night, not because of who they prove you are. I knew that in the library the moment your sleeve went back." He touched the letter, the one in her father's hand. "Because of this. Catherine, when did your father write it?" "The last night, the 10th of March. "The accusation was laid on the 28th of February, the Duke said. 11 days, which means on the 10th of March your father had already been ruined, and had already been told there would be no trial, and had already decided to take his family out of England." He turned the page around so she could read it. "So why does a ruined man spend his last night in his own house writing a list of dates?" Catherine looked down. She had read that letter 10,000 times. She had read the first line and the last line. "My Kitty, whatever they say of me be difficult," and she had wept over both. And she had never once, in 11 years, made herself read the middle, because the middle was numbers, and the numbers were the thing that finished him. 6 dates, 6 amounts, and beside each one, in her father's small hand, a set of initials. "He was not confessing," she said slowly. "No. He was showing where it went. He was showing who signed for it." The Duke put his finger beside the 4th line. "Look at that. Not the amount, the letters." Catherine looked, and the room, with its fiddle and its hens and its smoke, went very far away. "That is not my uncle's hand," she said. "No, those are his initials written by your father. But look at the loop." The Duke's voice had dropped. "I have had 11 years of correspondence signed with that exact loop, Catherine, because it comes to my house 4 times a year on the Western tenancies. Your uncle did not act alone. He could not have. A man in Hertfordshire cannot move £400,000 through the city without a name on the paper that the city already trusts." Catherine lifted her eyes. "Whose name?" she said. The Duke of Ashbourne looked at her across the candle for a long moment. "Mine," he said. "My father's. The House of Ashbourne endorsed every one of those 6 transfers, and your father knew it, and he wrote it down, and then he ran, because he understood that the only family in England who could clear him was the family that had helped to bury him. New Year's Eve. They rode back to Ashbourne on the 29th, and the Duke did not speak of the letter again for 2 days. He worked instead. Catherine had never watched a man work like that. He had the strong room opened, and the estate's old ledgers carried up to the library in tin boxes that had not been unlocked since his father's funeral, and he sat among them from morning until the candles guttered, and twice she came down at 2 in the morning and found him still there, with his coat off and his sleeves turned back, comparing a page to a page. On the 30th, he sent a rider to York. On the 31st, at noon, he came and found her in the conservatory, where she had taken to spending her mornings, because it was the only room in the house that did not make her feel like a guest. "There is a ball tonight," he said. Catherine kept her hands in the soil of the orange tub. "I know. The maids have spoken of nothing else." "Marchmonts. Every family in the riding will be in that room by 9 o'clock. He leaned against the doorframe. "I have gone 11 years running, and I have hated 11 of them." "Then don't go." "I am going," the Duke said, "and you are coming with me." Her hands stopped. "My lord." "Nicholas." "Nicholas." She turned around, soil to the wrist, hair coming down, mud on the hem of a borrowed dress. "Look at me. Look at me properly, and then say it again." He looked at her properly. "You are coming with me," he said. "They will tear me apart." "Yes." "They will decide what I am before I have crossed the floor, and every woman in that room will have it settled by the time the music starts, and there is no answer I can give them, because whatever I say will be the answer they already invented." "All true." "Then why?" The Duke came into the conservatory. He stopped an arm's length from her, and he did not touch her, and somehow that was worse. "Because Julian will be there," he said, "and your uncle knows by now that you were found, and in 8 days, or 10, or 20, a letter is going to arrive in this county about a woman with an open accusation over her name, and when it does, there are exactly 2 versions of you it can land on." He held up a hand. "The first is a woman nobody has ever seen, a rumor in a house. That woman they can do anything to, Catherine, because there is nothing to argue with. The second is a woman 400 people watched walk into Marchmont's ballroom on the arm of the Duke of Ashbourne on New Year's Eve, and spoke to, and were spoken to by. That woman is a fact. Facts are extraordinarily difficult to get rid of." Catherine stood among the orange trees with her heart going hard. "You are using me," she said slowly, "as evidence." "I am giving you witnesses," he said. "Your father had none. That is the whole of it. That is what ended him. 11 days in rooms with no windows, and not one soul who could stand up afterward and say, 'I was there, I saw, it was not so.'" His voice roughened. "I will not let them do it to you in the dark. If they are going to try it, they will try it in a lit room in front of the entire county, and every man in it will have to look at you while he does." The frost had begun to melt on the south wall. It ran down the glass in long, clean lines. "The gown," Catherine said unsteadily, "will be a problem." "Mrs. Danvers has been in the linen rooms since Tuesday," said the Duke, "and has informed me that if I dared to mention the matter to you before she had finished, she would leave my service after 40 years. The gown was ivory silk, cut plain. There was no lace on it, no flounce, no embroidery, nothing but line and cloth and a single band of dark green ribbon under the bust. And when Catherine came down the great stair at 8:30, she saw the Duke of Ashbourne look up and forget entirely what he had been about to say. "It is very simple," she said. "Yes?" "Mrs. Danvers wept twice and said the sleeves were an insult to God." "Mrs. Danvers," the Duke said, "is wrong." He handed her into the carriage himself. Marchmont's ballroom held 400 people, 600 candles, and one question. They came in at 9, and Catherine felt the room turn the way a field of wheat turns. It did not stop. That was the thing nobody warns you about. It does not stop. It only lowers, and the sound of 100 fans opening at once is the sound of a verdict being drafted. The mail-order woman. Advertised, my dear, in a paper. The boots. They say she arrived in boots that were penniless. Not a shilling. He has taken leave of his senses at last. The Duke's arm did not move under her hand. Chin, he murmured. It is up. It is up, he agreed. Keep it there for 40 minutes and the worst will be over. Lady Marchmont received her with the exquisite, freezing courtesy of a woman being watched. A dowager in purple asked, at volume, whether Catherine found Derbyshire very different from wherever it was she came from. A young man asked her to dance and was called away by his mother before she could answer. And everyone saw it, and everyone pretended not to. Catherine answered every one of them, pleasantly. In French, once, to the dowager, who did not speak it and had to be helped to a chair. And slowly, this was the strange part, the part she would think about for years, the room began to falter. Because a rumor cannot survive being introduced to a person. They had come prepared for a shrinking creature or a brazen one, and she was neither. And they had no third page in the script. By 10:30, a viscount's wife was asking her, genuinely, about Racine. By 11, the Duke had danced with her twice, which was one more than a man is permitted, and the fans had gone quiet in a different way. And at 1:45, the great doors at the far end of the ballroom opened, and the music thinned and died. Julian came in. He had dressed for it, black, immaculate, a man who had come to be looked at, and behind him walked 2 gentlemen in the sober dark coats of the profession, one carrying a leather case, and behind them, Catherine's hand closed on the Duke's arm hard enough to hurt. He was older, that was all. 11 years older, grey now at the temples, thinner in the face, and he had her father's eyes and her father's height, and her father's way of pausing in a doorway to let a room notice him.
Nicholas, she whispered, that is my uncle.
New Year's Eve, midnight. 400 people held their breath at once, and the ballroom made a sound like a house settling. Her uncle came up the length of the floor with the 2 lawyers behind him, and Catherine watched him do the thing she remembered, the pause, the small smile, the way he let his eyes travel the room and gather it. Sterlings had always known how to enter a place. It was the one gift he and her father had shared. Lady Catherine, he said, and his voice carried beautifully. My dear child, 11 years. She could not speak. Her body had gone somewhere else. She was 13, in a corridor in a house that no longer existed, listening to a man tell her mother that the kindest thing now would be to be sensible. Marchmont, her uncle went on, turning easily to their host. Forgive the hour. I would not have intruded for anything less. My niece has been missing since she was a girl. Missing, and I am obliged to say it publicly, since half of you have already said it privately, a sterling, with a matter still open against the name. He inclined his head to the room, all regret. I have come to take her home. I have papers. I have counsel. And I have, God help me, a duty. The murmur went round like a flame in dry grass. Julian stepped forward with his mouth already open, and he had waited 3 days for this sentence, and he never said it. Because the Duke of Ashbourne walked into the center of the floor. He did not raise his voice. He never did. He simply moved to the middle of that enormous room where the candlelight was strongest, and stood there, and the whole county turned to him because it had been turning to Ashbourne's for 200 years and did not know how to stop. Marchmont, he said, forgive me. I have 3 pieces of business and they will take 4 minutes. Nicholas, Julian began. The first. The Duke took a folded paper from his coat and held it up. This is a contract of engagement, dated the 6th of November, executed at a house in Cheapside, bearing my name. I did not write my name upon it. My cousin Julian did. He let that sit for exactly 2 seconds. The bond was £200. I have this evening paid it out in full to the office that issued it, and I have here their receipt, and the contract is void as of 8 o'clock tonight. There is no arrangement. There never was one. Whatever any of you has been told about this lady's reason for coming to Derbyshire, it was a forgery, and the forger is standing behind me in a very good coat." Somebody laughed. It was shocked out of them. Julian's face went the color of paper.
The second. The Duke turned. "Sir, you say you have a duty and papers. Would you be good enough to state, in this room, what the accusation against the House of Stirling actually was?" Her uncle's smile did not move. "Your Grace, this is hardly—" "Say it! 400 people have discussed it for 11 years. Not one of them has ever heard it read aloud." The Duke waited. "No? Then I shall. The Earl of Stirling was accused of moving £412,000 that was not his. 6 transfers between the March of 22 and the February of 23. The evidence was a set of ledgers no one was permitted to examine, and a witness who was never produced. There was no trial. There has never been a trial." His eyes did not leave her uncle's face. "Because a trial requires a countersignature. 6 transfers of that size cannot leave the city on one name. They require a second house, an old house, a trusted one, to endorse them. And in 11 years, not one soul in England has ever asked, out loud, whose name that was." The room had gone entirely silent. "It was mine," said the Duke of Ashbourne. Catherine heard 400 people fail to breathe. "My father's hand is on every one of those 6 endorsements," he said, and his voice did not shake, and that was somehow the worst of it. "I have the counterfoils in a tin box in my library. I opened it on the 29th of December, and I have not slept since." He turned, slowly, to the room. "My father endorsed them because he was asked to by a gentleman he trusted, and because the gentleman was a Stirling, and because in this county a Stirling's word was as good as coin. He did not read them. He signed them at his own dinner table between the soup and the fish. And when it went wrong, that gentleman put every farthing of it on his elder brother, who could not defend himself because the only house that could have confirmed his innocence was the house that had put its name to the fraud." He looked back at Catherine's uncle. "My father spent 11 years being quiet to save his name," he said. "So did I. We were told to be quiet by you, sir, 4 times a year, on paper, in that same loop you put on your correspondence about the Western tenancies. Because you have been reminding my family of what we endorsed since I was 19 years old, and I took it for business, and it was a leash." Her uncle's face had changed at last. Something had come off it. "You cannot prove I can prove it in an afternoon," the Duke said. "The counterfoils are dated. The Earl's own hand lists the 6 dates and the 6 amounts, and beside each one, your initials, written 8 days after the accusation was laid, by a man who already knew there would be no trial and wrote it down anyway so that his daughter would one day be able to." He put the letter back in his coat. "A rider left for York on the 30th. The papers are already with counsel. You are not taking anyone home tonight, sir. You are going to be asked questions in a lit room, in public, for the first time in your life. Enjoy the novelty." Her uncle stood in the middle of Marchmont's ballroom with 400 faces on him and nothing to sell, and Catherine watched the man who had emptied her childhood discover what it was to have no windows. He turned and he walked out, and the 2 lawyers looked at one another and followed him. And Julian did not follow anyone at all, because nobody would let him past. The Duke came back to her. "Third piece of business," he said quietly. "Nicholas, you will not like it." He took her hand and turned it and pushed the ivory silk back from her wrist and lifted her arm so that 600 candles found the silver and the 5 dark stones. "This is the Stirling bracelet," he said to the room. "There were 9 of them made.
I have seen this one at my own hearth on the wrist of a woman I was fond of at a Christmas dinner when I was 19. This is her daughter. He did not let go. She is Lady Catherine Sterling of a house that this county sold in 11 days, and I am going to marry her. Not because she came here in rags, because she stood at my gate in the snow and would not beg. And after tonight, ladies and gentlemen, neither will I." Then he turned to her in front of all of them, and there was nothing on his face but a question. "If she will have me," he said. New Year's Day. She had not answered him. That was the thing the whole county talked about for a generation afterward. Not the fraud, not the ledgers, not the sight of a man ruining his own father's name in the middle of a ballroom at midnight. What they talked about was that the Duke of Ashbourne had asked, in front of 400 people, and the woman in the plain ivory gown had looked at him for a long moment and said, quite clearly, "Not here." And he had bowed and said, "No, quite right," and taken her out to the carriage through a silence you could have leaned on. The morning came up hard and blue and cloudless, the way it sometimes does after a week of weather, as if the sky were embarrassed about itself. Catherine found him on the south terrace at 8, wrapped in the same black riding coat, looking out over snow that ran unbroken to the lime trees and the gates and the road beyond. There was frost on the balustrade. Their breath went up together. "You did not sleep again," she said. "I have decided to give it up entirely. It has never once helped." She came and stood beside him. Down at the far end of the drive, 2 of the grooms were walking a horse out. The sound of the bridle came up to them thin and clear across all that white. "Julian," she said. "Gone before 6. Bell put him on the London coach with his boxes and £40, which is more than he is owed and less than he asked for." The Duke's mouth moved without any humour in it. He wept. He told me he had only ever wanted to be trusted with something. Was that true? Very nearly. That is what makes it unbearable. He turned his cup. He had brought tea out into the frost, of course he had, and set it on the stone. "Your uncle's council called at 7, both of them. They wished it to be understood that they had been retained on a representation of the facts which has since proved incomplete, and that they are withdrawing, and that they would be grateful if their names were not mentioned." "And your answer?" "I told them that I had spent 11 years being grateful when men declined to mention names," the Duke said, "and that I had lately discovered I was not very good at it." Catherine laughed. It came out of her before she could catch it, and it went across the snow, and she saw him hear it. "He will fight," she said. "He will try. He has no house left to hide behind. That was the whole engine of it, Catherine. He never had a name of his own. He only ever had ours. York has the counterfoils and the letter as of yesterday afternoon, and the Sterling case reopens at the spring assize, and it will be slow, and it will be ugly, and I will be in the witness box for a week of it, being asked in public what my father signed at his own dinner table." He said it evenly. "The Ashbourne name will not come out of it the way it went in." "No." "I find," he said, "that I do not care very much, which is the strangest sensation I have had in a decade." Catherine put her hands on the frozen balustrade. "I read the middle of the letter," she said, "last night. All of it, for the first time. It took me until 4. He said nothing. "He knew," she said. "Do you understand? My father knew that night that your family's endorsement was the only thing that could clear him, and he also knew that the moment he said so, it would take your father down with him. Your father, who had signed between the soup and the fish because a friend asked, and he could not do it." Her voice went. "So he took his wife and his daughter and put them on a boat, and let them call him a thief for 11 years, and wrote it all down for me instead. And the last line—" "Be difficult," the Duke said. "He knew I would be the one who had to say it out loud. He gave me 11 years to grow into it, and then he trusted me with it." She wiped her face with the heel of her hand, roughly, the way you do when you have not had a handkerchief for a long time. "He was not protecting his name, Nicholas. He was protecting yours, and you have spent your whole life thinking your house buried his." The Duke of Ashbourne stood very still on his own terrace and looked out at the snow, and Catherine watched 11 years go out of a man's shoulders. "That," he said, when he could, "is a great deal to be told before breakfast." They walked. There was a path around the east front that the gardeners had cleared, and they went along it slowly, past the conservatory where the frost was already loosening on the glass. "The orange trees," he said, 6 feet nearer the glass, in March.
You remembered?
"I have remembered every word you have said to me since the gate," the Duke said, "which I concede is not a normal condition, and I have stopped attempting to reason my way out of it." He stopped at the conservatory door and took a paper from his coat. "Now," he said, "business." It was a marriage license. It had been drawn up in a hurry. The ink on the last line was barely a day old, and it was made out in the name of Lady Catherine Sterling, spelled properly, with her father's title written beside it in full, as though the last 11 years had been an administrative error that a competent clerk could simply correct. Catherine looked at it for a long time.
"It is my name," she said.
"It is your name. Nobody has written it down since I was 13, not once, not on a ticket, not in a register, not on a door." Her hands were not steady. I had begun to think it was a thing I had made up. "It is on this," the Duke said, "and it will be on the assize roll in the spring, and it will be in the parish book by Easter, if you will have me, and I intend for the rest of my life to make it extremely inconvenient for anyone in England to pretend they have not heard it." She looked up. "You asked me a question last night," she said. "I did. In front of 400 people, having just set fire to your own family's name, at midnight, with my uncle walking backward out of the room. It was theatre, Nicholas, magnificent theatre. And every one of those people would have watched me say yes and gone home and told each other that a girl in mended boots had taken a duke's moment and made the obvious bargain." Her chin came up, the way it had at the gate. "I would not give them that. Not one of them. Ask me again." The Duke of Ashbourne, on a terrace in the snow, with no audience but a groom 200 yards away and a house that had stopped pretending, took off his coat and put it around her shoulders, exactly as he had done at the gates on Christmas Eve. "Catherine," he said, "will you marry me?" She let the coat take her weight, that same absurd, enormous, wood-smoke-smelling weight, and she thought of a girl standing in the dark, refusing to ring a bell a third time. "Yes," she said.